Hello students, I hope you guys enjoyed your fall break. Unfortunately, we were not able to meet face to face today, so this is the recording of Chapter 7's lecture. So remind you, Chapter 7 is basically a continuation of Chapter 4. So a lot of things that are being covered this chapter, we've kind of already discussed. We're just going more into detail about some of these people, religions, situations, or events. All right. So remind you guys, best of luck on all of your midterms. Our midterm will be open all day on Wednesday, October the 12th. Midterm grades are due on Friday at, I think, 5 p.m. So remind you to also check week 9 information pertaining to everything for this week. All right. So Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is titled East Asia and the Spread of Buddhism, and the time frame is 221 BCE to 845 CE, which is current time. So remind you, Chapter 4, we stopped at 221 BCE, and so now we're basically picking up, as I said earlier, where we left off at from that chapter. All right, and so this right here is an artifact of a palace made from this time frame. All right, so remind you guys, in Chapter 4, we talked about the Warring States period and the person, not the person, but the dynasty who was the most prosperous at the end of the Warring State periods were the Chen Dynasty. So for the first time in centuries, like, China was unified as one under the Chen. And with that, the emperor, he ended up taking the title of first emperor. And the Chen Dynasty, they operated under the legalist principles. Remind you, legalist was a key term for Chapter 4. And the emperor, he also ordered the nobles to move to the city and to leave their lands. And so he began to count and organize the humans, the human resources that were available. And he planned on beginning large public work projects, and he needed to use the labor force. So remind you, I told you guys this in Chapter 4, that China was one of the very first civilizations or societies where they utilized the men as the soldiers, and they also utilized the soldiers to pretty much build up the community and keep the community on on go, whether it was agricultural, business, economy, artisans, civil service, anything of that nature. And so one of the achievements under the Chen Dynasty was the Great Wall. So remind you, the Great Wall of China, it is a key term for you guys. And this is also something that formed under the Qin unification. This is something you can look for. This is a question that will be on the next test and also your final exam as well too. But once the Great Wall was built, the labor was drafted to build a structure that would create a border along the northern realm of the Qin Empire. So the whole purpose of China basically building the Great Wall was to keep the Mongols out. And so when we talk about the Mongolians, they're very oppressed people today at this time, but in earlier times they were very, I guess you could say savage-like. They were great warriors, skilled warriors, and we'll get more into the Mongolians as well too. But an extravagant tomb was built to protect the emperor's remains, and he has survived 3 assassination attempts, and he was concerned about assassins in the afterlife, and so this is why his tomb was filled with hundreds of terracotta figures of soldiers. Instead of having actual real life soldiers, he had just, the figurines of soldiers to pretty much stand as in an imagery of protecting him in the afterlife. And so with So this is pretty much an example of what I'm saying. He had the miniature soldiers. And this is the army of the first emperor of the Chen Dynasty. And this right here is the Great Wall of China. Okay, so the Han Dynasty. So the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE to 220 CE. So remind you right here, we're going from the Qing unification from 221 to 206 BCE. And also remind you in BCE time kind of goes like backwards versus forward with current time. So that's why this starts at 206 BC and it counts backwards and it eventually gets to 0 and then counts correctly and ends at 220 CE. I'm sorry, that's not the right slide. Okay. All right. So with under the Han Dynasty, you have Emperor Gaozu. He pretty much maintains the centralized government of the Chen Dynasty, but he did remove some of the harsh aspects of the older dynasties. Emperor Wu, however, he minted coins, sold offices and titles. He also increased taxes on private business. And a lot of these economic blows were pretty much aimed at supporting the military. And next slide, Han intellectual and cultural life. So once again, we're revisiting Confucian or Confucianism. So under the Han, Confucianism, it pretty much made a comeback. And this is not our last time talking about Confucianism or Confucian, because remind you, even though this is something that came from ancient civilization, this is something that is still very much a part of Chinese culture today, or Asian culture today. And so Confucian scholars were given privileged positions in society. So the Confucian classics, which are a key term for you guys, they were revered as a wisdom of the past. The classics were used as moral guidance, and commentaries were written on these classics. And so Han art and literature, it also revolved around the omens, the potents, the spirits, the immortals, and other occult forces. The emperor, he also attempted to make contact with the gods, and this was through offerings of food and also of wine. And the historian Sima Qin, he stressed visiting historical sites, researching artifacts, and also questioning other about events. And these, the culmination of this work or this research, it was placed in the records of the Grand Historian. And this is also a key term for you guys as well too. And so the invention of paper, it facilitated the circulation of books during this time frame. And so, of course, the Han Empire, this is a map showing the Han, which is basically everything that is in the lighter orange. The Chen is in the darker orange. The Great Wall is everything in the zigzag right here. And as you guys can see, that's the Mongolian steppe. And the Manchurians are also kind of together with the Mongolians, but they are blocked off for a particular reason, and we'll get there, of course. And of course, everything that is in the purple are other trade routes, and the red is the Silk Road. And this is also Banzhou, who was a Han Dynasty writer. All right, and this is a bronze mirror. All right, so with Inner Asia and the Silk Road, so early Chinese history, it documented contacts with northern nomads who raised sheep, goats, and other domesticated animals. So Chinese farmers in Inner Asia, Asian herders, they also had little respect for each other. And so with the Xiongnu pretty much coming together and forming a confederation of nomadic tribes, this is what made China basically build the Great Wall. They were fearful of the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu are, basically, like I said, the Mongols or the Mongolians. And we will discuss them more deeper into the course as well, too. So efforts to push back the nomadic tribes, they were, of course, costly. And the emperor, he went to Central Asia to find allies and horses. So with that happening, trade routes, they start to develop. And these routes, they made up what came to be known as the Silk Road. And so this is where Chinese items such as silk, which was a very sought out after commodity, they were shipped on these routes. And so the Han Dynasty developed a tributary system, which is a key term for you guys. And this was basically to regulate contact with foreign traders. States and tribes outside of China's borders, they sent envoys, to do the trading. Next slide. All right, so this map right here is basically showing us the silk trade in the 7th century CE. Of course, as you guys can see, the Silk Road is everything that's highlighted, and it's the red route. And of course, the green are other trade routes that came about in between Asia and Africa and Europe. Okie dokie, and this right here is a multicolored brocade that was found in Naiga along the southern branch of the Silk Road. And this is also a silk banner from Dunhang. And this is an ox-drawn plow. Remind you, they were making the animals work for them until the machinery and technology got to where, of course, it developed into today. Okay, so life in Han China. Peace, it did bring about population growth and new roads, and it helped connect different parts of the country. Han had 2 capital cities, and they both became lively centers of commerce and craft. So government patronage, it maintained the quality of craftsmanship in the area. So Chinese metalworking, it was very, very extensive. And iron, it eventually replaced bronze in tool production, just as it did for all civilizations, just not only the Chinese. Remind you, everybody went through the Bronze Age together, then of course developed into the Iron Age, and then from there we will also advance as well too. And so the Chinese, they were able to pour liquefied iron into molds, and this is where bronze was still used in numerous products such as jewelry, mirrors, and also coins. And so the bulk of the Han population, they were farmers who did live in small villages. And to help farmers, the Han Dynasty, they kept the taxes low. They provided relief during famines, and they also provided new agricultural techniques and encouraged migration from crowded places to areas where new land could be opened and worked. And so the Chinese family, it was patrilineal, and great emphasis was placed on filial piety, remind you, which was a key term in chapter 4. And so with China and Rome, remind you, Rome was, of course, more diverse than China. They had a multitude of languages where China only had one, and that was logographic. And so the dynastic principle was stronger in China, and this made the Chinese system of politics stronger because, remind you, every time we'll discuss the Chinese, they're basically doing the same thing. They're just adding on and making things better or tweaking it.